The ledger goes red. The numbers bled on the screen. I've balanced other people's chaos for 28 years. Field trip money, PTA reimbursements, petty cash envelopes that walk like toddlers, but nothing makes my stomach knot like a red deficit on my own account. The trust account portal flashed a neat figure, $250,000. Not pending, not processing. Final. I blinked until the digits doubled, then steadied them with a slow exhale. Snow dusted along the windowsill outside my duplex in Nokomis, a thin, white crust that made the street lamps halo. January in Minneapolis is honest like that. It shows you what's fallen and what's stuck. The Whitaker family trust wasn't glamorous. It was my late husband Daniel's union pension payout, the sale of our house in Bloomington, and the modest life insurance my grief counselor called permission to breathe. We created the trust 3 years ago to keep the funds off limits from temptation. Mine, my sons, my siblings, the whole messy orbit of can I borrow that bankruptcy taught me to avoid in my 20s. If College Board was a person, it would be the beneficiary. If life happened, we'd be okay. That was the pitch. Impossible, I whispered, leaning closer as if my breath could fog the truth. I checked the transaction history. The portal politely time-stamped the withdrawal at 10:42 a.m. that morning. Authorized wire to an account number I didn't recognize, with a memo line that pinged like a smoke alarm. Distribution per co-trustee authority. Co-trustee. Marla. My sister-in-law thrived in the thin air of luxury real estate. White teeth promising quartz countertops, a perfume that smelled like high-limit credit cards. After Daniel died, she was all casseroles and lists, plumber numbers, lawn care, grief books. Let me manage the trust with you, Nora. The portfolio will do better if you're not stressed. I said yes, because when grief breaks you, you hand people your passwords and hope they honor the house. I dialed the trust officer's direct line anyway, because the portals are designed to keep panic contained, but the voice of a person can still crack. Hi, this is Nora Whitaker. I'm calling about a wire transfer that just... Yes, Ms. Whitaker, came the pleasant Midwestern syllables. We received co-trustee authorization for a distribution this morning. Standard verification. As a reminder, either trustee can authorize a distribution within the terms. Within the terms, I said, voice steady in that way I get when the office phones ring in a chorus and the fire alarm chirps low battery. What terms say you can remove $250,000 without notifying me? There is an either-or clause in your trust instrument that allows either trustee to act independently for distributions under the discretionary category, she said. The form included a notarized signature. If you'd like, I can email the signed docs us for your records. Yes, I said, throat dry. Email it. My finger hovered over another contact before I knew I'd chosen him. Hey, Ma. Ethan's voice came sunny through static, the kind of cheer that used to melt the frost off my mornings when he was 7 and missing teeth. Now he was 26, HVAC tech with a tool bag like a tank and forearms that belong to men who get things done. You good? Are you at a job site? I asked. Yeah, but I can talk. Why? I'm driving to Marla's, I lied, though I was still in slippers. She took $250,000 from the trust. Silence. A soft whistle from his side, like someone's heat pump trying to live. She did what? Wire. Co-trustee. I'm going now. I slipped my feet into boots crusted with salt, grabbed my parka, and clicked my keys with a resolve that tasted like pennies. Don't do anything. Don't call her. I'll handle it. Mom, he said, the way he did when I switched boxes on the moving day from our old house. The day he wanted to be the man and I wanted to do the heavy lift. Do you want me to? No. I was out the door, the cold slapping my lungs. I want you to trust that I know how to count. Lake Nokomis lay still in the dusky light, a plate of blue steel under a thin veil of snow. I drove the gray Corolla along cedar-lined streets where Minnesota lives shrink, huddle, and endure. The world held its breath, and I defied it by exhaling. Marla's condo in Uptown was glass and chrome, all angles and intention. She buzzed me up like it was an inconvenience to cross the room. The elevator smelled like eucalyptus and staged success. "Nora," she said, opening the door in a soft sweater the color of champagne. She looked delighted, like a realtor whose open house had just attracted a buyer with pre-approval in hand. "You look surprised.
I know I should have said
You moved my money."
but I was scared.
I stepped past her into a living
He made
room
me
where
do
nothing
it.
had
I couldn't
fingerprints.
stop him.
"Where did it go?" Her lips lifted in the kind of smile you use on clients who ask for lake view on a pond budget. "It's our money, darling, and it went into an opportunity. Short-term, safe, high return. It's what I do." "It's a trust for Ethan's future," I said, "not your flip project." She tilted her head. "Your son is an adult. Your future is now. And before you throw a fit, read the instrument. Either trustee can act. You signed that. If you want to be a bookkeeper, be a bookkeeper. If you want growth, let me drive." "I want receipts," I said. "Wire details. Where, when, who." Marla's eyes flicked to the glass-topped desk. "You'll get a statement. Nora, you should really consider—" "No." The word warmed me. "Email me the documents by tomorrow at 9. All of them. I'll be at the bank at noon to freeze the account." She laughed, soft and pretty. "You can't freeze what you don't control." I stepped closer, feeling the buzz under my skin that comes when the PTA treasurer tries to get cute. "Watch me." Outside, the cold bit at my knuckles until I couldn't feel the keys. I sat in the car and called Ethan back. "Don't do anything," I said again. "I'm locking it down." But as I stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror, red nose, stubborn mouth, I realized that I had already done something. I had woken up. Paper houses and people. The trust officer's office smelled like banker's boxes and lemon wipes. She had small hands with neat nails and a careful way of offering tissues that made me want to prove I didn't need them. I slid across the table the email Marla had sent at 8:58 a.m., 2 minutes earlier than I demanded. A PDF titled Distribution Authorization, discretionary with Marla's looping signature and a notary stamp. "Can you verify the notary?" I asked. "I want the log entry, the journal." The officer blinked. "We don't typically—" "Good," I said, palms open. "Then this is new." I leaned in. "Also freeze the trust pending dispute. It's discretionary, so let me be discretionary. Place a hold." She glanced at the document again, nibbling a lip. "Given there's no court action yet, our policy—" "I'll file today," I said. "Temporary Restraining Order on Distributions, Hennepin County. I've worked in schools long enough to know the policy is no until someone in a blazer writes yes. Feel free to confirm with legal." Maybe it was the tone. Maybe it was the way I used the word policy, like a bat. She stood. "Let me talk to my supervisor." While she disappeared behind a glass door, I pulled out my notebook. I've been a list maker since the pantry moths of 1999 taught me that order, or at least the illusion of it, could save your cereal. I wrote, "Freeze trust? Requires TRO. Verify notary. Journal entry. ID used. Date/time. Where did wire land? Account number. Bank. Beneficiary. Pull trust instrument. Amend either/or clause? Can we? Talk to Ethan. What does he know?" My phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. "You okay?" I typed back. I'm colder than a Minneapolis church basement and twice as stubborn. Be home late. The officer returned with a precise smile. We've placed a precautionary hold on additional discretionary distributions pending trustee consensus. It's temporary. You'll need to file an injunction to make it formal. Thank you, I said. Now the wire. She hesitated, then turned her monitor. We wired funds to an entity called Northland Landmark LLC, Sun Harbor Bank, St. Paul. Beneficiary manager, M. Whitaker. My pen stopped. M as in Marla? As in the name provided, she said. I need the wire receipt, I said, and I need your internal verification call log. Her eyebrows lifted. We record calls, but... Good, I said again. Subpoena me later. The log glowed on her screen. 10:35 a.m. Outbound to Monsieur Whitaker. Verification cues answered. 10:41 a.m. Wire released. It was all so tidy, like a stage living room with no blankets in sight. By the time I took the elevator down, the sky had whitened to that Midwestern brightness that isn't sun, just the clouds deciding to lie. The cold caught in my scarf, made breathing honest work. I drove to the Hennepin County Government Center because officials don't take you seriously until they've watched you ride an escalator to nowhere. The clerk wore reading glasses on a chain and had the kind eyes of women who have explained the same form to every flavor of panic. You're asking for a temporary restraining order on your co-trustee, she said, scanning my petition. And expedited hearing? Yes, I said. My voice didn't shake. You'll need to serve her, she said. You can use a process server or a friend, but they can't be a party. I suggest a server. They're good at finding people who think I'm not home is a strategy. I know where she lives, I said. She'll answer if there's a mirror involved. The clerk smiled like she'd allow herself that joke. Filing fee is... I paid. Money is a language power understands. By noon, I had a hearing date, Tuesday, 4 days from now. The judge's name meant nothing to me, which meant everything. In the white box they reserve for nature of dispute, I wrote, breach of fiduciary duty, unauthorized distribution for personal gain, risk of irreparable harm to beneficiaries. I texted Ethan again. Dinner? 7? I'll pick up from Quang. He replied with a thumbs up and a heart, because he has always been a good boy, even when he isn't. At 6:45, I parked outside the little Vietnamese place on Nicolet, where everything tastes like steam and lineage. Snow freckled my hair when I slid into the booth. Ethan arrived with a flurry of cold and the smell of machine oil. Okay, he said, eyes scanning my face. How bad? Bad enough that I filed for an injunction, I said, and bad enough that Marla created an LLC to receive the wire. Northland Landmark. Guess who the manager is? His jaw settled. She took it. She took it, I said, in my dead husband's name. He swallowed hard. What do you want me to do? Nothing, I said. Eat. But as he tore into a spring roll, his hands weren't steady. That's when it happened. The small flicker, the shudder across his eyes I know because I watched it in his father when the weight of a mortgage payment collided with dinner talk. Ethan? I said softly. What else? He exhaled, then shook his head. Nothing. This is just a lot. It was. But a mother can feel the pebble that started the avalanche even as she's running from the snow. Outside, the temperature sank, and the ice made a noise like old houses settling. I went home and printed everything. The wire details, the LLC registration I pulled from the Secretary of State's website. Registered last month, manager M. Whitaker. Registered agent a law firm I recognized from billboards with confident hair. Paper makes things real. And if you're going to fight paper, you better bring a stack. At midnight, when the city went silent in the way only northern cities can, drawers closing, boots on mats, I took out Daniel's old notebook. He kept it during the last year when he felt time thinning. Notes about pain flare-ups, nurses' gentle competence, which TV reruns kept the nights less cruel. In the back, he'd written a sentence I'd found once and then never looked at again. If you're reading this without me, fight for our boy the way you fought for us. I closed the book and pressed my palm to it. I'm trying, I said to the room that held his absence. But if our boy is the fire, I need to know where the matches are. Freeze and mesh, freeze and fire. On Monday, the bank's legal department delivered politeness with bullet points. We cannot release call recordings without subpoena. We acknowledge your request for freeze. Per policy, we'll wait for court order. Policies always arrive dressed for a lunch they didn't invite you to. I spent the morning calling process servers. The first one bragged about catching deadbeat dads in deer stands. I went with the woman from St. Paul, who had a voice like a Sunday school teacher and a Yelp review that said, "She served my ex at his barbershop while he still had the cape on." "Send me the address and a photo," she said, efficient. "Any history of violence?" "Only with credit cards," I said. "She'll accept service if you use a tone." "Ma'am," she said, "tone is the only weapon we carry." I sent the packet and reread the LLC filing. Northland Landmark LLC had no website, no history, no pores. It was a brand new glass box, painted to look like granite. The registered agent was Halverson and Pike, a firm that made its money persuading juries that contracts were not promises but aspirational poems. At noon, the process server texted a photo of the affidavit. "Serve complete." In the picture, Marla's manicured hand held the papers like they could stain. The timestamp suggested she had been served in the lobby of her building, marble floors reflecting her surprise. "I didn't see Ethan that day. He texted from a service call in Egan and said he'd be late. We're replacing a rooftop unit and the wind is a jerk," he wrote. "I'll call later." By late afternoon, I was at the government center again, because sometimes fighting feels like walking the same carpeted hallway until it wears thin. In the corridor outside the judge's chambers, I ran into an associate from Halverson and Pike. Brown shoes too expensive to be this shiny, a tie that looked like a stock photo of a tie. "You must be Ms. Whitaker," he said, hand extended. "I'm Connor Pike." "Of the Pikes," I said, because sometimes you can be petty without anyone getting hurt. He smiled. "We represent Ms. Whitaker. We're confident the distribution aligns with the trust's discretionary language. No harm, no foul." "Half the dictionary is discretionary," I said. "It doesn't mean you get to steal with better font." He opened his mouth, closed it, then settled on patronizing. "We'll see you tomorrow." I didn't sleep much. Tuesday, the sky softened into a pewter bowl. Court was small, the room humming with heater vents and the worn patience of a judge who has heard every version of why this money should have that new home. Marla wore winter white like she was auditioning to be snow. Her lawyer did the talking. She did the sculpting with her face. Chin high, eyes sympathetic to her own position. "This trust was created to allow the trustees to make timely, prudent investments," Pike said smoothly. "My client identified a short-term opportunity in a mixed-use redevelopment. The funds went into an LLC controlled solely for that purpose. The beneficiary remains Miss Whitaker's family." I stood when it was my turn because sitting felt like conceding height. "Your Honor, I'm not a developer," I began. "I'm a school office manager who keeps track of milk money and inhalers. I chose a trust so my late husband's death wouldn't be the beginning of 1,000 small humiliations. My sister-in-law moved $250,000 out of that trust into an LLC she controls. She did it without my consent, without notice, and without a single document showing the investment terms. This is not how fiduciary duty behaves." The judge, silver hair, eyes like a glacier that's observed valleys form, leaned forward. "Ms. Whitaker," she said, glancing at Marla. "When did you first learn of the transfer?" "Saturday," I said. "I came here Monday. I served her yesterday." The judge nodded. "Ms. Whitaker, other Ms. Whitaker, why was there no advance notice?" Pike smoothed a page. "The trust instrument allows either trustee to act. It was a time-sensitive transaction." "What is the investment?" the judge asked. "Specifically." Pike launched into something about redevelopment near the river, layered ownership, capital stack. I listened for the words that might save me, but what I heard was scaffolding around a building that didn't exist yet. The judge lifted a hand. "I'm enjoining any further distributions pending hearing in 30 days, she said, gavel light as a dessert fork. "And I'm ordering full disclosure. All documents related to the transfer, including the operating agreement for Northland Landmark LLC, bank statements, notary journal, and all communications. If this is legitimate, prove it. If it's not, I don't think you'll like my remedies." Later, in the hallway, Marla's smile wilted just enough to be satisfying. "You really want to fight with me, Nora?" she said. "You don't know the rules of this game." "I don't need your rules," I said. "I have a calculator and a judge with a calendar." Her eyes cooled. "Careful. There are things you don't want dragged into this. Family things." "That sounds like a threat," I said. "Save it for your TikTok." I walked away before she could decide whether to laugh or lunge. My knees trembled when I hit the cool winter air. But I've learned tremble doesn't mean retreat. It means you're moving. That night, Ethan showed up at my door with a bag of groceries like that could fix the economy. He unpacked onions, ground beef, tomatoes, shredded cheese. Chili is a Minnesota apology. "Mom," he said, not meeting my eyes. "We should talk." I set the can opener down. "Finally!" He swallowed, tugging the bill of his cap like it could shade the room. "Not yet. Tomorrow. I need to get my ducks in." He stopped, a laugh catching wrong. "I need to get my courage." "Ethan," I said, soft as any prayer. "Are you in danger?" He looked up then, and in his eyes I saw Daniel on the day of his diagnosis. Fear, yes, but also defiance that looked a lot like love. "Not after tomorrow," he said. The chili bubbled. The snow fell. Somewhere in the city, an LLC sat in a server, waiting to learn which side it belonged to, asset or weapon. Field notes from a filing cabinet. On Wednesday morning, Connor Pike emailed a zip file the size of a poorly folded futon. I opened it with the suspicion I reserve for flattery. There were documents: operating agreement for Northland Landmark LLC, a glossy one-pager describing a transformative redevelopment near the Mississippi riverfront, capital calls, projections, a term sheet with numbers that looked like they had been airbrushed. But the operating agreement snitched if you read it like a person who has learned to distrust adjectives. Manager managed. M. Whitaker. Members. M. Whitaker. 100%. Contribution? $0. Prior to initial funding. Distributions? At manager's discretion. In other words, the LLC was a box in which Marla could put my money and take it back out with better lighting. The notary journal was worse. The entry showed Marla's signature notarized in a Stillwater coffee shop 2 hours before the bank's call. The notary had initialed a note. "No ID, personally known to me." Those words are how friends turn law into convenience. "Cute," I muttered. I printed the pages, highlighted like a teacher on her last good marker. Then I did what Daniel used to call field notes. I went to see the thing they claimed existed. The address in the glossy sheet was a stretch of warehouses with good bones and bad roofs along the river. The winter wind came up the water like a dare. I parked and walked the block, snapping photos with my phone of rusted doors and brick that had held a century of commerce without asking for a brochure. There was no construction fence, no posted permit, no "this project financed by" sign that developers use like mating calls. A woman with a reflective vest and a clipboard emerged from inside one of the buildings. She had the posture of someone who knows how many days in every schedule can be stolen without the cops noticing. "Hey," I called. "You at the site?" She eyed me. "Which site?" "Northland Landmark," I said, testing the name. "Mixed-use redevelopment." She squinted toward the river, then back at me. "Never heard of it," she said. "This block is in limbo. Ownership group's been trying to sell for 2 years. The bank's got paper on it like a coat. If there's a redevelopment, I'm the Virgin Mary." "Thanks," I said, and meant it. When I got back to the car, Ethan had texted, 6 p.m. my place. Alone. The word alone did a cold thing down my back. For the first time, I allowed a thought I'd been dodging like a pothole. What if the missing money wasn't just Marla's greed? What if Ethan had... I stopped myself the way you slap a hand going toward a hot stove. The trust was protected. The judge was watching. I was not going to set myself on fire to keep anyone warm again. At home, I changed into the sweater Daniel used to say brought out my eyes. A stupid detail that would have made me roll mine 2 years ago and broke me into wet pieces now. I drove to Ethan's apartment in St. Paul, a 3rd-floor walk-up with a view of a brick wall that looked better in summer. He opened the door like he'd been standing there for 20 minutes listening to my footsteps. He hugged me too tight, then stepped back. "I need to tell you something," he said. "And you're going to hate me, and it's going to save us." My scalp tingled. "Okay." He motioned to the kitchen table, where he'd laid out papers the way I'd taught him to lay out Lego's instructions. Neat, sequential, with a prayer that it would look like the box when you were done. There were printouts of bank statements from his checking account, cash withdrawal slips, a photo of a battered blue duffel bag, a voice recorder, a folded piece of paper stained with something dark. "What is this?" I asked, the words already turning to ash in my mouth. "It's me," he said, voice steady. "I did it." Silence is different when it enters a kitchen. It takes up space where the salt should go. "You did what?" I said. He swallowed. "I moved the money. Not all of it. I moved it before Marla did, and she moved it again. And the reason I did it was because she was going to anyway, and because she had me by the throat." He took a breath that looked like it scraped his lungs. "She's been paying me under the table for months." "What?" I said, the word ablade. "Cash," he said, eyes finally meeting mine. 2,000 here, 3,000 there. She paid me to sign things, to pick up envelopes from her office, to deliver documents to a lawyer, and not ask what was in them. I told myself it was side work. I told myself it was fine. But it wasn't fine. He pushed the stained paper toward me. It was a photocopy of a promissory note with Ethan Whitaker typed at the top and a signature that was almost his, except the last name slanted like a drunk. "She forged me," he said. "And then she didn't have to. Because I owed her." "For what?" I asked, throat closing. He looked at his hands. "For keeping quiet about Dad." My heart knocked once, so hard it made the world wobble. "What about your father?" Ethan closed his eyes. She told me Dad borrowed money from her right before he died. A lot. She said if I didn't help her with this investment, she'd take the trust to court, say you mismanaged it, say Dad's debt meant it should be liquidated. She said she'd make you sell the house, that we'd look like trash in church. She said. He stopped, jaw rigid. She said I was never going to be more than a maintenance man unless I learned how the world actually works. I felt something ancient rise in me. Not rage exactly, but its older sister. The thing women grow when the world keeps finding clever ways to mug them. Did Dad borrow money from her? I asked. He shook his head, a small, violent movement. No, I checked his notebook. I checked his email. I called his union rep. I called the bank. I called Pastor James. He didn't take a dime. She made it up. Then why? Because I was stupid and scared, he said. Because when a woman like Marla looks at you like you're a dog who learned how to stand, you want to prove you can fetch. Because I thought if I played along, I could control it. He gestured at the papers. So I moved the money. Not to her LLC, to an account I opened with the help of a friend, someone who owes me a favor. I moved $150,000 2 weeks ago. I did it to see if she'd notice, to make her show her hand. Today, she moved $250,000 to cover the hole I made. I stared at him. You stole from me to save me. He didn't flinch. I stole from our own trust to trap the person stealing from us. And the duffel bag, I said, nodding at the photo. Cash she gave me, he said. I kept it instead of delivering it. It's in a locker at the depot. The code is your birthday. Ethan, I began. He cut me off, voice dropping to a place I'd never heard it. There's more. He pressed the voice recorder into my hand and clicked play. Marla's voice filled the kitchen, smooth, dismissive, edged with the boredom of someone who has always gotten away with it. Don't be dramatic, Ethan. It's not stealing if you intend to give it back. Money moves through entities all the time. Your mother won't understand because she prefers to fold napkins for potlucks and pretend that's dignity. But if you want to be a man, you'll move the money when I tell you. My head snapped up. Ethan watched me like a trial, braced for a verdict. There's more, he said again, and the next segment stabbed. Marla. If you don't, I'll call the trust officer and say you're siphoning funds, which, thanks to your practice run, is technically true. I'll have the court close the trust and pull everything out. I'll have reporters outside your mother's little duplex asking what she did with her dead husband's money. She'll fold. Ethan's voice on the tape was small and furious. You're a monster. Marla laughed. I'm a realist. Bring me the signature. Bring me the boy who knows how to be useful. When the tape clicked off, I realized I'd been gripping the recorder so hard my palm had imprinted its shape. Why didn't you come to me? I asked, each word measured. Why did you let her use you? He swallowed. Because I was ashamed I'd started taking her money. Because I thought I could fix it before it touched you. Because I needed it for... He stopped, eyes flaring. For something else. I waited. He didn't speak. Ethan, I said, steady. Whatever else is about to come out of your mouth, make sure it's the right version. He stared at me, then nodded once, like he'd decided to jump after standing on a cliff for hours. After the tape, he said, you'll know everything. The confession that broke and built us. He didn't make coffee. He didn't offer a glass of water. He did the thing I'd watched him do when he had to tell me at 14 that he'd crashed the neighbor's go-kart. He planted his feet like they had to hold the house. I've been paying blackmail, he said. The room filled with a heat that didn't come from the baseboards. For what? He met my eyes. For my daughter. Time is a graceless dancer. It spun and stepped on my foot. Your daughter, I repeated, tasting the word like it had foreign edges. He nodded, fast, like ripping fabric. Her name is Jade. She's 2.5. Her mom is Lily. She works at the supply house. I didn't tell you because I thought I was doing the right thing quietly. Lily's ex is trouble. He found out about Jade. He started coming around. He figured out I'm a Whitaker. He wanted money. I put a hand on the back of the chair because the world had thinned. How much? Ethan's jaw worked. At first, a few hundred, then 1,000. Then he wanted 3 monthly. When I couldn't cover it, he threatened to tell Lily's parents and show up at your work. He said he'd take Jade. I got scared. That's when Marla started paying me. She knew, Mom. I don't know how, but she knew. She said she'd help a young father if I helped her with the trust. He laughed then, ugly and raw. I let her make me a father and a thief in the same breath. A cold calm pooled at the base of my spine. Does Lily know? She knows about Jade, obviously, he said, pain sparking with sarcasm. She doesn't know I took money from Marla. She doesn't know about the trust. She thinks I got a raise. We're not together. Not really. We co-parent. It's messy. The blackmailer, I said. Name. Trent, he said. Trent Avery. I wrote it. Phone, address. He slid a paper across the table with a number and an address in Frogtown. The handwriting was Lily's, careful block letters. He watched me write like the pen was a fuse. I should have told you, he said. About Jade, about the money, about all of it. Yes, I said, then softer. But now that I know, this changes everything. Something uncoiled in his shoulders. It was relief, but not the clean kind. It was a relief that left a mark. I picked up the recorder again. This is enough to bury her. Mom, he said, voice cracking. I thought you'd hate me. I reached across the table and took his hand. I'm angry at parts of you I recognize, I said, but hate is lazy, and we don't do lazy. He let out a breath that shook like the ending of something. The money you moved, I asked. Where is it? In a custodial account under Jade's name, he said quickly. I thought if anything went wrong, it would look like a college fund. I was going to move it back after Marla made her move. We are going to, I said, and he closed his eyes like the pronoun was a blanket. Here's the plan, I continued, the office manager in me clocking in with a vengeance. We return the $150,000 first thing tomorrow, before the bank's "where did it go" becomes "call the cops." We give the judge the tape. We give her the notary slop, the LLC agreement, the fake promissory note. We file a police report against Trent for extortion. We tell Lily before he does. We build the fence before anyone knows there's a yard. And Marla, he said, the name like a curse. Marla is going to learn what paper can do when it belongs to the right person, I said. We will petition to remove her as co-trustee for cause. We'll seek a surcharge for the $250,000 she moved. We will request the court assign a neutral institutional co-trustee. We will sue her LLC if we have to, pierce it until it squeals. He stared, then laughed, disbelieving. Mom. What? You sound like Dad. That landed like mercy. We spent the next hour making lists. I called a lawyer a friend at church had used for a probate fistfight, the kind of woman with gray curls and reading glasses who could transform into a machete. We scheduled a meeting for 9 a.m. I typed a script for telling Lily that I will not judge the geology of her mountain. I will help with the climb. At midnight, after Ethan had fallen into a couch sleep that looked like surrender, I stood by the window and watched St. Paul pretend to be a snow globe. I thought about babies, about daughters you didn't know you had, about how family expands in both directions when you're not looking. I thought about Daniel, who would have cried at this and then made a dumb joke about buying extra goldfish crackers. My phone buzzed. A new email from Connor Pike, subject line amended disclosure. Inside, a single PDF, a clarification that Northland Landmark LLC had been formed for asset protection and future development opportunities, and that no personal benefit would be taken by the manager. It read like a memo you write when you smell smoke and want to stand outside the building with a coffee and claim you've always hated fire. I replied with a single line. Preserve all electronic communications. Consider this a litigation hold. I copied the judge's clerk and our new lawyer because etiquette is how civilized people declare war. In bed, I lay awake long enough to feel the exhaustion hit me like a wall. And still, behind my eyes, the ledger glowed. Not red this time. Just bright enough to read, bright enough to correct. The last thought before sleep took me was not about money or court or ice that squeals under your boots. It was about Jade, tiny, half me in the way children are half people they've never met. The thought brought with it a strange kind of power, like holding a match and understanding for the first time that you could burn a building or light a candle. We were going to do neither. We were going to build. Do you want me to continue writing the remaining chapters? Litigation. Hold. Mother mode. By 8:58 a.m., we were in Attorney Felicia Moran's office. Bookshelves of annotated statutes, a plant determined to photosynthesize through Minnesota winter, and a framed bumper sticker that read, "Don't confuse my kindness with surrender." Felicia read fast, the way people eat when they know they'll need the calories. She skimmed the LLC agreement, the notary journal, our TRO, then rewound the recorder and listened to Marla tell my son what a man was. She hung herself with a silk rope, Felicia said, clicking her pen. Here's the list. Motion to suspend and remove co-trustee for cause. Petition for accounting. Request for surcharge and disgorgement. And, because I'm feeling festive, referral to the county attorney for theft by swindle and financial exploitation. We'll also notice the Department of Commerce for notary misconduct. First, I said, we return the $150,000. Felicia nodded. Good instincts. I'll draft a stipulation acknowledging return without prejudice to your claims. That keeps the court from treating it like an admission and keeps Pike from spinning it. Ethan sat forward, eyes red but clear. And Trent? Felicia looked at him the way generals look at young soldiers. Extortion is a felony. Nora, you and Ethan will make a report today. Do not meet him alone again. If law enforcement wants a controlled handoff with marked bills, we cooperate. If they don't, we don't freelance. I exhaled. And Lily, we tell her tonight. Script it, Felicia said. Facts, no apologies. We are securing Jade's safety. A man named Trent tried to extort. Law enforcement is aware. You are not to engage. Then you listen. She turned to Ethan. And to keep your house clean, you sign a sworn declaration. Dates, cash, how Marla approached you, that recording's chain of custody. Ethan nodded, jaw set. I'll sign whatever it takes. Felicia smiled without softness. Good. Because we're going to win with paper and patience. By noon, the wire back to the trust cleared. The trust officer's email pinged polite relief. I replied with 2 sentences and attached Felicia's stipulation. The ledger on my screen returned to black. Not redemption exactly, but air. Then we drove to the Western District substation. The detective on duty, short, solid, the aura of a woman who doesn't misplace things, took our statements while the clock on the wall clicked like an old metronome. She moved our story into boxes on a screen with a speed that said she'd built other cases out of domestic shrapnel and bank printouts. "Text him," she told Ethan. "Tell him you'll bring cash at 8. Public place with cameras, parking lot of the grocery on Victoria. I'll have a car watch from the far edge. If he reaches for the envelope and makes the demand, we move." Ethan's shoulders rose and fell. "Okay." We left and drove in silence. At 4, I parked 2 blocks from Lily's duplex. The smell of dryer sheets and snow hung in the air. When she opened the door, hair in a loose knot, jade on her hip with a graham cracker, I saw the life we were now accountable to. A living room with a thrift store couch and a bright foam alphabet mat and a calendar blocked off for shared custody like a chessboard. I told Lily the script. I said the words no mother of any age wants. Your child is safe because I refuse to be quiet. Lily listened, and when I finished, she cried without drama. The efficient tears of women who keep appointments and baby wipes and faith. "I didn't know what to do," she said, voice shaking. "Trent gets mean fast and then he gets sorry. I thought we could ride it out." "You ride out weather," I said, "not men who confuse ownership with oxygen." I looked at Jade then, curls damp from a nap, eyes enormous. She looked back, serious, as if deciding whether I was furniture or story. I smiled, and she considered smiling back, then shoved another fragment of cracker into her mouth, because hunger is the most honest instinct. At 7:50 p.m., Ethan pulled into the grocery lot, parked under a camera, and waited. I sat in Felicia's Subaru across the way, engine off, breath clouding the windshield. 2 unmarked sedans idled near the far exit. The detective's silhouette was a cutout against the sodium lights. Trent rolled up in a sedan that had once been blue. He got out with the confidence of men who have never had to say they're sorry, and the posture of men who might learn. He wore a hat that thought it was a personality. Ethan stepped out, envelope visible. My son's hands didn't shake. He'd grown up next to hospital machines that beeped and wept. He knew how to stand still when rooms turned violent. Trent's smile was wrong from 20 yards. He walked close, said something we couldn't hear, and Ethan held up a hand, chin high. Trent gestured at the envelope, stepped closer, reached, then flinched when Ethan said something that made him look around, eyes narrowing, nostrils flaring. The detective's door opened. The unmarked sedans moved. It was clean. It was practiced. It was relief. They cuffed Trent with calm efficiency. He shouted about misunderstandings, called Ethan names that bounced off the snow and didn't stick. The detective read him his rights like a bedtime story no one wanted. When they put him in the back seat, he looked across the lot, straight toward our car, and met my eyes. I didn't flinch. Neither did he. The window went up. Ethan walked across the lane toward us. When he reached the car, he put his palms on the roof and lowered his head to the cold metal. He stayed like that for a beat that felt like a decade. Then he looked at me and tried to smile. "He's not our weather anymore." "No," I said. "He's just tomorrow's docket." Felicia exhaled. "Good. Now we turn the heat on your sister-in-law." Discovery is a spotlight. 30 days came fast and slow, the way courtroom time does. In that month, we lived on dock drops and coffee. Felicia treated Discovery like a sport, and we brought her snacks. The bank produced call logs and a transcript of the 10:35 a.m. verification call. Marla had answered the security questions with the ease of someone who helped draft them. Last 4 digits, mother's maiden name, the street of our first apartment. She'd always remembered the details that weren't hers to hold. Halverson and Pike sent us emails with subject lines like further clarification and updated Exhibit A and motion in limine. Felicia responded with exhibits heavy enough to use as doorstops. The notary's journal entry became our favorite piece of paper. No ID, personally known to me. A postage stamp confession glued to a coffee shop table. Felicia deposed the notary on a Thursday. By Friday, the Department of Commerce had opened an investigation. Turns out, personally known is a narrow bridge, and the state doesn't like people dancing on it in Ugg boots. We also learned what Northland Landmark really was. A shelf LLC Pike's firm had used twice before. For an athlete's hush-hush condo purchase and a developer's option that never materialized. Same template, same manager structure, same font, different mark. Felicia found a line in our trust instrument I'd skimmed years ago. Appointment of trust protector. 5 bland words that tasted like dry toast until she buttered them with strategy. "Read this," she said, tapping the paragraph. Daniel named Pastor James as trust protector. Limited powers, including the authority to remove and replace a trustee for good cause shown. We'll ask the court to bless the protector's exercise of that power to expedite Marla's removal, in addition to your statutory petition. 2 lanes to the same exit ramp. I closed my eyes. Daniel, with his chemo-brittle hair and his notebook of tiny, stubborn hopes, had left me a trapdoor and the map to find it. The morning of the hearing, the courtroom was warmer than last time. Or maybe I was. Lily sat behind us, hands folded around a set of keys with a pink rabbit's foot that left fuzz on everything. Jade was with her parents. I'd left a tiny stuffed loon on her car seat because I'm a Minnesotan and we express love with lakebirds and lasagna. Marla wore navy instead of white, her hair a glossy helmet. Pike looked caffeinated and overconfident, the specific arrogance of men who mistake expensive for correct. Felicia went first. She moved like a winter river, calm surface, unstoppable underneath. "Your Honor," she began, handing up binders that thunked. "This is not a case about aggressive investing. It's about a co-trustee who used an either-or clause as a crowbar to pry open a bank account and slide funds into an entity she alone controls. The manager managed LLC, the notary irregularities, the timing of the wire relative to the formation of the entity. These are not hallmarks of prudence. They are the choreography of control." She clicked the recorder. Marla's voice poured into the room, the contempt sharpened by acoustics designed for contrition. When the line about your mother folding napkins for potlucks echoed against the paneled walls, something in me went still. I watched the judge's eyes sharpen, not at the insult, but at the phrase, "Move the money when I tell you." Pike objected on everything but the weather. The judge overruled with the patience of a woman who has seen every trick. Then Felicia called Pastor James. He stood straight, a man whose neckties all tell the truth. He testified about Daniel's intent, prudence, stability, transparency. He testified about the trust protector clause, about Daniel's fear that grief would turn smart people reckless. He did not cry. I did. "And have you exercised your powers as protector?" Felicia asked. "Yes," he said, placing a single page on the stand. "Upon reviewing Ms. Moran's submissions, I executed a removal of Marla Whitaker as co-trustee for good cause, effective upon court approval, and appointed North Star Fiduciary Services as interim. Co-trustee with Ms. Whitaker, Nora, not Marla, retaining co-trustee status. North Star has consented." Pike stood. "Objection. Surprise." Felicia smiled with fox-quiet teeth. "It's in our brief. Page 12. Pike shuffled, then regrouped. He called the notary. Under Felicia's questions, the woman folded like a card table. You notarized Miss Whitaker's signature without ID. She's a regular at the cafe. And you wrote personally known because she orders the same latte? Yes, I mean, I know her. Everyone knows her. Everyone knowing you, Felicia said, is not the same as you knowing everyone's driver's license number. You understand that you are admitting to violating notarial standards? The notary's voice shrank. Yes. Pike tried to rehabilitate, but the bruise bloomed anyway. Finally, the judge leaned back, templed her fingers, and looked at Marla the way cold looks at water. Ms. Whitaker, she said, tell me, in your own words, why I should not remove you as co-trustee and order you to return $250,000 forthwith. Marla's mouth opened. She arranged her face into concern, then into resolve. Your Honor, I acted in the trust's best interests. I have decades of experience in real estate. The opportunity would have doubled the fund within a year. The either-or clause permitted action. Miss Nora Whitaker is emotional, and while I respect her grief. Stop, the judge said, not loud, but final. This court grieves men like Daniel Whitaker every week, Miss Whitaker. It does not, however, permit grief to be used as a crowbar. Silence. You could hear the snow outside thinking about falling. Order, the judge said, voice crisp. Marla Whitaker is removed as co-trustee effective immediately. North Star Fiduciary Services is appointed interim co-trustee with Ms. Nora Whitaker. North Star will conduct a full accounting within 20 days. Ms. Marla Whitaker will return $250,000 to the trust within 5 business days. The court imposes a preliminary surcharge in that amount, subject to adjustment after accounting. The court refers this matter to the county attorney to review for potential criminal charges and to the Department of Commerce for notarial discipline. Litigation hold remains in effect. We reconvene in 30 days. Pike began to stand. The judge lifted a finger. Sit. The gavel was soft. The verdict was not. In the corridor, Marla approached, smile gone, skin 2 shades paler. You set me up, she hissed. No, I said evenly. You set your own table. I just RSVP'd. Her eyes slid to Ethan. You think this saves you? She said to him. You're a pawn, honey. You always were. Ethan stared at her with a gentleness that made me proud. Pawns become queens when they cross the board. Marla snorted, but it came out wrong. Then she walked away on heels that finally sounded like knives. Lily squeezed my hand so hard I almost asked for ice. You're terrifying, she whispered. Only on Tuesdays, I said, and felt my mouth curve into a smile that wasn't nice at all. That night, at my kitchen table, we passed around takeout and the pen Felicia had given Ethan to sign his declaration. He signed like a man telling the truth on purpose. After Jade was asleep in her portable crib by the radiator, Lily sat across from me and said, Do you want to see pictures from her first haircut? Yes, I said, and we scrolled through a small specific history that had somehow always included me. Outside, the city exhaled. Inside, we redistributed weight. When the river thaws 5 days later, $250,000 came home. The wire receipt looked like sunlight on paper. North Star sent a preliminary accounting that was dry enough to be trustworthy and blunt enough to be kind. Felicia forwarded a note from the county attorney. Investigative intake opened. The notary surrendered her stamp pending review. Halverson and Pike filed a motion to limit prejudicial media dissemination after a local reporter ran a small piece about real estate insider faces removal from family trust. I declined to comment because I like my victories on the record, not on the air. Marla stayed loud in the ways that don't leave fingerprints. Someone created an Instagram account called @NoraWastes, posted a photo of a school lunch tray and a caption about bookkeepers with champagne tastes. Someone slid a note under my door with neat block letters. Grace doesn't always mean you're right. Felicia shrugged. If she wants to make this a PR war, she picked a dull sword. Instead, we kept making a life. Ethan installed a taller chain on Lily's door and a sense of safety on my block. He started a separate savings account named Jade529 and handed me the login because trust, like money, is more real when you can see it. I learned Jade's laugh, how it bursts like soap bubbles and then lingers like a song fragment. I learned that she loves blueberries and hates mittens and calls me Nona, which is not my name and the best name I've ever had. On Sundays, she sat on my lap during Pastor James's sermon and tried to whisper, but mostly narrated her shoelaces. 3 weeks after the hearing, North Star's final accounting arrived with color-coded tabs I wanted to kiss. The trust was intact, its arteries unclogged. The surcharge stood awaiting final judgment. Felicia drafted a settlement proposal. Marla would pay an additional $35,000 in fees and costs, resign any residual claim to trustee status, and sign a consent order with Commerce. In exchange, we'd forgo a civil trial for punitive damages. It was generous. It was also smart. Trials cost more than they heal. Pike asked for a meeting to explore resolution. We met in a conference room with a view of the river still sheathed in ice. He made a show of taking off his watch, Timtimes, if time were an offering. Marla wore a scarf like armor. Pike opened. My client accepts removal. She disputes surcharge and referral. Felicia leaned back. Your client installed herself as sole manager of the entity she moved funds to, used a non-compliant notarization, and then attempted to intimidate the beneficiary. This is not a gray area. This is a cul-de-sac painted red. Marla's eyes flashed. I made a mistake. People make mistakes. Felicia slid the recorder across the table and pressed play on the line where Marla lectured my son about potlucks. When it ended, Felicia clicked the pen. That's not a mistake, she said. That's a worldview. Pike pinched the bridge of his nose as if migraines were persuasive. Counter. Repay $250,000, which we have. Pay $10,000 toward fees. No referral. Felicia didn't blink. $50,000 fees. Consent order. You can keep your teeth. Marla laughed, a brittle sound. You think you're so righteous because you found a clause your dead husband signed. I leaned forward. No, I said quietly. I think I'm righteous because I didn't teach my son that money is a personality. I taught him that when you break a thing, you bring a broom. She stared at me, lips parting, then closed her mouth and looked back at the river as if it might take a side. In the end, we settled near our number. Surcharge affirmed, fees paid, consent order signed. The county attorney's office sent a letter thanking us for cooperation and noting ongoing review. Marla's realtor license went to inactive. Halverson and Pike sent an associate to pick up the check. Pike kept his watch. On the first real thaw day in March, I took Jade down to the river. The ice groaned and shifted, slabs nudging like whales. Minnesotans lined the path and pretended we weren't all on the verge of crying because the sun had decided to remember us. Jade toddled in her puffy coat, mittened hands up like she was blessing the air. She stopped and looked at the water, then at me, and pronounced, wet. Profound, I said. You get that from your grandfather. Ethan caught up with 2 cups of hot chocolate and a look that still carried more apology than it needed to. You okay? He asked. I am, I said, surprising myself with how true it felt. We are. He nodded toward the far bank. where a crew had finally put up a construction fence around a different warehouse entirely. Think Marla ever learned what a permit looks like? She'll learn what a mirror looks like first, I said. It's less forgiving. He handed me the cup. The hot chocolate was too sweet, which is how it's supposed to be. We stood there, 3 people and a small new person who made everything before her both heavier and lighter. Later that night, after I'd dropped Jade at Lily's and come home to a duplex that suddenly felt too quiet, I opened Daniel's notebook again. In the margin next to the Trust Protector clause, he'd scribbled a single word I'd missed the last time. Checkmate. I laughed until the room blurred. Then I closed the book, turned off the light, and let the dark be only dark. Because there were still things to finish. Final orders to enter, a long conversation with my son about how we teach girls to recognize men like Trent and how we teach boys not to become them. A new trustee relationship to settle into. A playpen to buy for my living room because a little girl had discovered the fascination of power outlets. But there was also this. The ledger had stopped bleeding. It was just ink again. And when I lay down, I didn't hear numbers screaming. I heard a river thinking about spring. Do you want me to continue writing the remaining chapters? The cost of clean hands. Spring came to Minneapolis like a receipt printed in pale green. Proof the transaction had gone through. But you still had to file it. The settlement check cleared. The consent order with Commerce posted to a state webpage that only lawyers and night owls read. North Star sent me a tidy note confirming that the trust's assets were fully restored, diversified, and bored. I framed that word in my mind. Bored money is honest money, but clean hands have a cost. It arrived in small, practical bills. First, the county attorney. We sat in a conference room with coffee as old as the carpet, while an assistant prosecutor explained their posture in sentences that had been practiced against other sadnesses. Felony theft by swindle is on the table, she said, but juries like victims who look like their own grandmothers. Your sister-in-law looks like cable news. She lifted a hand. We pursue what we can win, not what we can feel. That said, the notary referral and the consent order help. Felicia nodded. We understand. We're not here for vengeance. We're here for precedent. I looked at the whiteboard behind the prosecutor and imagined writing. Women who steal with stationery are still thieves. Instead, I said, we trust your office to turn this into a cautionary tale. She smiled, a real one. We like those, she said. They travel well. Second, Lily. She needed more than a script and a soldier. She needed a plan that didn't rely on adrenaline. We met at the Hennepin Family Justice Center, not because we were fighting, but because paper doesn't believe in handshakes. A mediator helped Ethan and Lily turn their truce into an operating manual. Parenting time, holidays, a text-only rule for schedule changes, child support that looked like math instead of guilt. Ethan agreed to attend a co-parenting class that he joked sounded like group therapy for people with calendars. When the mediator asked if there were extended family we wanted listed for pickups and emergencies, Lily looked at me. Nora, she said, if you'd like. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I would, I said. I like being useful. Third, the bank. The trust officer met me in the lobby with an apology that was both sincere and policy compliant. We've updated our procedures, she said, sliding a new 2-factor authentication form across the table. No single trustee acts without an email and call confirmation to both. Not even for discretionary distributions. We've also added a notary verification flag for documents that say, personally known. She grimaced very slightly. We hadn't seen that one in years. Scams go out of style, I said. Then they come back wearing a new scarf. She laughed. We're sorry, Ms. Whitaker, for your trouble. I almost said, "You didn't cause my trouble. You just gave it a password." But she was being human in a building built to be otherwise. "Thank you," I said instead, "for helping me unlearn nice." The last bill came due at church. Marla showed up on a Sunday in April like a bad weather pattern that had read the schedule. She chose a pew 3 rows ahead of mine and 2 to the left. She wore modest gray, as if repentance had a Pantone. When the music swelled, she sang the alto line flat and loud. After the service, she stood too close to the coffee station, stirring a cup that had nothing to do with coffee and everything to do with an audience. She looked at me once, a small, sharp glance like a reflex. I took Jade to the table with the cookies and taught her how to pick the oatmeal raisin on purpose. "The good ones are less shiny," I whispered. "That's true of a lot of things." On the way out, Pastor James stopped me. "You all right?" "Better than a bank with a lock," I said, and he snorted. "Be cautious," he said, eyes flicking toward Marla. "People who are used to getting their way don't pivot. They plot." "I know," I said. "That's why I'm making my own plots." At home, I opened Daniel's notebook again because grief is a boomerang that still knows your address. I flipped to the back where he'd written little jokes to himself during chemo when nurses came with needles and he came with stubbornness. In tiny block letters, he'd written, "We don't get through, we get around." I thought of that line later that week when Felicia forwarded me an odd email, a bland professional note from a paralegal at Halverson and Pike, subject line, professional courtesy. The body read, "FYI, Ms. Whitaker, your case prompted an internal review. It appears our firm reused a Shelf LLC template in a way that created risk for multiple clients. Mr. Pike has resigned to pursue opportunities elsewhere. Unrelated, of course. This is not an admission of anything, just a courtesy." I stared at it, then at the attached PDF, a firm-wide memo outlining enhanced compliance. I printed it, hole-punched it, and slid it behind a tab labeled "Proof that Gravity Works." Sometimes you don't need a headline, you need a footnote with teeth. That night, Ethan came by after putting Jade to bed in her room at Lily's. He brought a small, battered box. "Dad's old chess set," he said, setting it on my table. "Figured it belonged here." The pieces still smelled faintly of lemon oil and waiting rooms. I set up the board, white toward me, black toward Ethan. He moved a pawn. I mirrored. We played the quiet way we used to. Little sounds of wood on wood, remembering where we've been by how we move. Mid-game, Ethan cleared his throat. "I signed the paperwork to make Jade the contingent beneficiary." My fingers paused over the bishop. "You did?" He nodded. "If anything happens to me, to you, to Lily, the trust will take care of her. Not with noise, with food, with books, with boredom." I smiled. "The best gift." He watched the board. "You ever think about what Dad would say?" I moved my knight. "He'd say we overcomplicate rooks," I said. "And then he'd cry and pretend it was allergies." I looked at my son. "He'd be proud." Ethan blinked fast and then grinned, a quick, crooked thing. "Your move, Mom." I checked him in 3, not because I'm better, but because I've been paying attention longer. He laughed and lifted his king. "Mercy." "There isn't any," I said lightly. "There's just love and paperwork." He snorted. "Put that on a mug." "Already did," I said, and slid him a tea I'd poured into a white ceramic cup that read "Love and Paperwork" in blue. He groaned and drank anyway. The river thawed. The sidewalks filled with dogs reconnecting with their mission. My duplex smelled like lemon again instead of adrenaline. And somewhere out there, a woman who had taught me the shape of my own spine posted filtered photos of sunsets that did not belong to her and wrote captions about resilience. Sometimes stories don't end with jail. They end with job changes and quiet consequences and the slow erasure of invitations. It's less satisfying on TV. It's perfect for the rest of us. Still, I wanted an ending that a bookkeeper could frame. It came 2 weeks later, with a final hearing and a judge who had an eye for balance sheets and theater. We stood again in that warm courtroom, with its humming vents and its polite knives. Felicia had prepared a proposed order that was both surgical and kind. Pike had sent a junior associate who kept looking at the ceiling like God might file an amicus. The judge read for a long time. When she finally looked up, she smiled. Not kind, not cruel, just right. "Ms. Whitaker," she said, and for the first time I didn't ask which one. "Final orders in 10 days. Prepare yourselves." It felt less like a cliffhanger than a benediction. I walked out into sunlight that had the audacity to be warm. I held the door for a woman with too many files, and she thanked me with her forehead. I went home, opened the notebook, and wrote the date under checkmate. "Close enough," I told Daniel's handwriting. "Close enough." Final accounting. The order arrived on a Thursday, 3:17 p.m., the hour when office phones do their last chorus and teachers measure the universe in bell schedules. Order and final judgment. I printed it. My hands shook like they did the first day Ethan was tall enough to look me in the eye and tell me he was going to be fine. I sat at the kitchen table, smoothed the pages, and read aloud, because some victories want witnesses even if the only witness is a plant and a radiator. "The court finds," I read, "that Ms. Marla Whitaker breached her fiduciary duty as co-trustee by effectuating a transfer of $250,000 to an entity under her sole control without adequate notice, consent, or documentation evidencing a prudent investment." I exhaled. "The court orders removal of Ms. Marla Whitaker as co-trustee, approves the appointment of North Star Fiduciary Services as independent co-trustee, and authorizes Ms. Nora Whitaker to continue as co-trustee. The court imposes a surcharge equivalent to the transfer, already repaid, and awards attorney's fees and costs in the amount of $48,600. The court retains jurisdiction for oversight of the accounting." A footnote made me smile. Note, the either-or clause does not license unilateral action inconsistent with settler's intent. Prudence is not a synonym for secrecy. Felicia had written that line in our brief. The judge had adopted it. Seeing our words in an order felt like seeing your handwriting on a diploma. The same, but sanctified. I set the papers down and dialed Ethan. "It's official," I said when he picked up. "We are boring," he whooped. "Best thing you've ever called me." Jade yelled something in the background about a pony, which I chose to hear as hooray. That evening, we met at church, neutral ground that smelled like coffee and crayons, for one last conversation we didn't owe anyone, least of all ourselves. Pastor James had printed a copy of the order and pinned it to his bulletin board under a printout of the Beatitudes, which he swore was a filing error, and I chose to treat as art. Marla arrived late. She looked smaller, not because she had shrunk, but because the air around her had stopped editing. She sat across from us without the scaffolding of representation or the weaponry of adjectives. "I received the order," she said, voice even. "Congratulations." "This isn't a trophy," I said. "It's a fence." Her mouth twisted. "You always wanted to be the good one, didn't you?" "I wanted to be the one who slept," I said. Silence settled. Jade fussed, and Ethan jiggled her knee. Pastor James watched us with the calm of men who've memorized psalm cadences and courtroom schedules. Marla cleared her throat. "I brought something," she said, sliding an envelope across the table. It was thick and smelled faintly of the kind of perfume that tries to be a memory. I didn't take it. "Another LLC?" Her smile tipped. No, an apology. She nodded toward the envelope like a stage direction. Letters, one to you, one to Ethan, one to Lily, and one to the court for the record. I don't expect forgiveness. I expect accuracy. I stared at her. You want us to read your version? I want your daughter, she hesitated, corrected. Your granddaughter to grow up with a story that's precise. Her voice softened in a way I didn't trust, which was progress. I do not like you, Nora, but I am not a cartoon. I got scared of being poor. I confused hunger with entitlement. It is boring to be wrong. I reached out then and took the envelope because sometimes you take what is offered so you can show your own daughter how to keep a hand clean while touching a mess. We'll read them, I said. She stood. Good luck, she said. It is hard to be right all the time. It's harder to fix it when you're wrong, I said. But it pays better. She smiled without teeth. You would know. After she left, Pastor James coughed into his fist in a way that sounded suspiciously like a laugh. Well, he said, the Lord works in depositions. We laughed too, tired, human, relieved. On the way out, Ethan put Jade into her car seat and tucked the loon plush under her arm. She patted it and whispered, Nona, in the reverent tone reserved for crackers and dogs. I kissed her forehead and felt the quietest click inside my chest, like a lock finding the right key. At home, I set the court order next to Daniel's notebook and the chess set. Under checkmate, I wrote the date again, then added a new line. We didn't burn it down, we audited it. I made tea and opened the envelope Marla had left. Her letter to me was 3 pages of plain admissions and dull sentences that did not ask for absolution so much as placement. She named the shelf companies. She listed the clients whose money she moved between entities like furniture. She wrote a line that lodged like a thorn and then softened like cloth. I learned, late, that power is more boring than I thought. I confused movement with purpose. I folded it and placed it in my Proof That Gravity Works binder. I printed an extra copy and dropped it at Felicia's the next morning because I wanted the file to have an appendix called When the Weather Tells the Truth. 2 weeks later, the county attorney filed a misdemeanor charge, unauthorized practice under Notarial Act, against the coffee shop notary and a deferred prosecution agreement for Marla contingent on compliance with the consent order and a donation to a local housing nonprofit equal to her fees. It was not the thunderclap some friends wanted. It was the steady rain we needed. Life didn't get cinematic, it got reliable. I kept my job at the school office and accepted a small stipend to train other bookkeepers in fraud for people who hate fraud. Felicia's title, not mine. I did a Saturday workshop at church called Paper and Power, How to Read What People Hope You Won't. Pastor James brought donuts. Ethan installed the projector and fixed the flicker in the fellowship hall lights that had annoyed me for 10 years. Lily sat in the back, taking notes like she was studying for a better future. Jade toddled through the aisles like a small, determined auditor. North Star remained co-trustee, and I liked it that way. A neutral adult in the room is a gift you don't realize you wanted until you stop waking at 3 a.m. North Star's quarterly statements arrived on paper thick enough to feel like comfort. Performance, modest. I taped that phrase to the fridge. Spring leaned into summer. We bought Jade a kiddie pool and taught her that water belongs in the pool and not in the herb garden, and she taught us that basil is surprisingly resilient. Ethan began to sleep with his shoulders on the bed instead of hovering over it. Lily and I traded recipes and babysitting and the kind of small trust that never makes the news. One evening in June, I drove to the river by myself, parked at the same spot where the wind had once dared me, and walked until my feet remembered how to belong to me. The water moved at a pace that suggested both purpose and rest. A heron stood knee-deep in its own patience. I took out Daniel's notebook and wrote a final note. Not because anything is really final, but because accounting has to close to mean anything. Dear you, we did it. We turned a confession into a lever and a ledger into a life. He told me the worst thing, and it became our best tool. You were right about fighting for our boy. Turns out, I also had to fight with him, and then beside him, and then for his girl. We are boring now. It is the most thrilling thing I know. Love, N. I tore the page out and tucked it under a rock by the water. Not as an offering, not as litter, but as proof to myself that the story could survive outside the binder. On the walk back to the car, my phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. Jade said accountant when she saw your calculator. She also called the cat assets. A picture followed. Jade in a sun hat, face sticky with watermelon, grinning at the cat that had never balanced anything in its life. I laughed so hard a couple on a bench looked over, and I waved because joy is better shared, even with strangers. At home, I put the chess set back in its place and the binder on the shelf. I poured tea into the love and paperwork mug and held it with both hands, the way you hold a warm truth. The money hadn't just come back. The power had changed hands and then settled where it belonged, in a family that now knew the difference between motion and meaning, between secrets and strategies, between being loud and being right. People think the plot twist was the tape, or the trust protector clause, or the Instagram account that dried up like a puddle in good weather. They're wrong. The real twist was simpler. My son told the truth, and it flipped the power back to where it always should have been. Back to the ledger. Back to love. Back to us.